You're listening to Feathers, a podcast of stories about God speaking and his people having just enough faith to believe him and obey. I hope these stories inspire you and encourage you to take flight in your own faith. I'm your host, Amy Bennett, and this is Season 2, Episode 11. Well, hey guys, and welcome back to Feathers. I'm so glad you're here. We actually have a lot of new people joining the last couple episodes, so I'm so excited to have more people listening to these stories. I know that they have challenged me and inspired me so much. I think I told somebody the other day, I said, I need a podcast that I can just talk about the podcast and talk about the stories we're hearing, just because they've impacted me so much. Today is actually going to be a little bit different than we normally do. I feel like I keep saying that over these episodes, but you got to make it work for what you're doing. So I talked to our guest this week, Elise Hurd, and she has experienced a very traumatic thing over the last year. And just ahead of time, I want to tell somebody that this is a trigger warning. So we will be talking about sexual abuse. So if that is something that is a trigger for you, I am totally okay with you guys just turning this episode off. I don't want to upset anybody. So that being said, she is actually sharing the story of the sexual abuse of her daughter. And the amazing thing is that God actually brought some good things out of it. And that is just the miracle worker that God is. I can't even believe I'm saying that in the same sentence, but God really has brought some good things out of it. And she has such rich lessons that have been fought and won and given through some hard circumstances. And it's so rich that I've decided to split her story into 2 episodes just because I think it's just so good. And we actually did talk for quite some time. So I want to respect everybody's time during the week. So you're going to have a part 1 with Elise Hurd this week, and then we'll have part 2 next week. But I really hope that you pay attention and listen, because this is the kind of stuff that you can't just read in a textbook. Like, these are the lessons that are birthed out of a personal relationship with Jesus and things that he teaches you through hard struggles and circumstances. But it did take faith, and it took obedience on her part to do what God was telling her to do. So I just hope you have an open heart. She shares so much grace, and you can see just like the love that oozes out of her. It's just, she really challenges me. It's like, wow. I don't know if I would have handled it all with such grace. So I learned so much from her already. So I hope you guys enjoy this and just have an open heart and open hands to see what God might teach you through this. So here's my conversation with Elise Hurd. Elise, welcome to Feathers today.
Hi, Amy. Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited for you to be here too. I would love if we could start out, if you could introduce your family.
Sure. Well, I have an amazing husband. His name is Jason, and we have been married for 6 years now. 7 years, excuse me. Ooh, I always give him a hard time about that, and I forgot. So for
it goes by fast.
It does. For 7 years, and we have 4 daughters. The oldest is 10. And then the next one just turned 6 years old, and then we have a 3-year-old, and then a 19-month-old, and just recently found out that we have another baby coming in May of next year, so in about 10 weeks.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. We're very excited.
Oh, very good. So you have 4 girls.
Yes.
Are you hoping for a 5th girl?
We are okay whether we have a girl or a boy, but it would be really lovely if we could have a boy. Part of that's super intimidating to me, but I know some awesome boy moms, so I would just be definitely calling them like, what do I need to know? Help me, please. So.
Yes, and you are friends with somebody we've had on the podcast before, Becky Keefe, right?
Yes, I adore Becky Keefe. She is awesome, and she has 3 boys, so I will be texting.
Yeah, so her and I talked about that a lot when she was on the podcast. So you have a great resource.
Yes, I do.
Okay, so you have a business, right? You have an online business, Little Lunch Maker. Do you want to tell us about that a little bit?
Sure, yeah. Little Lunch Maker right now is just a print shop where I make custom gold foil prints, and the stories behind the prints are kind of as important as the art itself. But that's going to be expanding into T-shirts and other things. It's really just about encouraging people that your very ordinary faithfulness is the stuff of miracles. It's very important. And so I started that business to be a support to my husband. His father has advanced Alzheimer's, and so his full-time job is caring for his dad right now. He's an only child. And so I kind of started some things from home online to be a help in any way I could.
Oh, that's so awesome. I love to hear stories behind it like that. Very cool. Well, let's go ahead and jump into your story, because I know you have quite the story to share today. And it's a hard story to share, and I'm so thankful that you're going to do that. But I think it really displays God's faithfulness to us, and because of God's faithfulness to us, how we can be faithful to Him even through, like, the worst of times. And so I would love if you could just take us back to the beginning of your story and share with the listeners what that looked like for you.
Yeah, I'd be glad to. And that's very true. God has been faithful through this entire process. And when I was thinking about where to start the story, because God so often, especially if we have something really hard in our lives, has prepared us in some ways for a very long time that we can look back and see that. But I'll start about a year and 2 months ago from today, when I was at the Declare conference. It's the first conference I've gone to, and that was in August of 2014. And I was nervous about going because I'd totally forgotten how to even keep eye contact with adults, because I'm always like watching my children as they're trying to climb things and just get into stuff. And so I was like, am I even going to be able to have adult conversation with these women? But you mentioned Becky Keefe. She was going to this conference. I was super excited, and God that was a miracle in itself for me to go, how that was financially provided for, just childcare, everything. He knew that I needed that for this story that I'm going to get into. And on the last day of the conference, I was trying to pay attention to the keynote speaker, but God was just really prompting me that He had something He wanted to tell me. And He doesn't always impress things on me that firmly, especially when I'm around other people. But so I left the main room and I went into the prayer room, and He told me very clearly that He was going to lead me into a desert, and that it was going to be in preparation for ministry. And kind of my main concern, or the thing that I was talking to Him about, was saying, okay, God, is this a desert like I'm not going to hear from You? Because I've heard of people who have seasons of dryness. And I was just like, please, not that. I need to be able to have my connection with You. And, but I'm like, I'm for it. I want whatever You have for me. And He just really comforted me. Several things about it. No, I'm not going to leave you. I'm going to speak to you. I'm going to be with you. This is not because of some wrong you have done, but I'm going to lead you into a kind of desert space. And I didn't know what that meant. I was more kind of focused on He's preparing me for ministry. This is exciting. This is wonderful. I'm not thinking about what a desert could possibly be. And so it was a miracle that I was there. That was a very significant word from Him. And so that...
Yeah, I just love that. I mean, I just love that it's so clear already, like, what the relationship that you have with God, and for Him to be so gracious to prepare you like that and let you know that that's coming. I love that.
So gracious. And I needed it, as you'll see in just a moment, because it was only a couple of weeks after I was back from the conference, and I was just doing my normal daily life with the girls, and one of my daughters said a couple of sentences to me that immediately they were kind of just like a kick in the stomach. I just knew from what she said that there was no reason for her words, even the concepts that she had in her mind, if something was not grossly inappropriate that had happened with her. And so while I was very careful just to use the words that she was saying to me when I asked her questions back, and I wanted to be very careful not to put any ideas in her head and that kind of thing. But so through a long conversation, it came to light that she had been sexually abused, and she was able to identify who it was and just tell me different things. But God was with me really from because it's easy when your kids are talking to you, especially my girls talk so much about so many different things, to kind of tune out their frequency even sometimes. But from the very first sentence that she said to me, God was very gracious in that I heard her. I was fully focused on what she was saying, and I just knew immediately, this is significant, pay attention. And so once she had confided in me the extent that she could about this abuse that had happened, I noticed a dramatic change in her just immediately. It was like, now that it was on the surface and she had found some words for it and she had told someone, she didn't know how to handle the pain. She didn't know how to handle the shame and the wrong that had been done to her. And so we started getting into these 4 to about 6 hours, just really intense emotional meltdowns, and they were happening every day.
And how old is she at this time?
Well, since I have 4 daughters, and I haven't said which one it is.
Okay.
Because I want it to be, I don't know what parts of her story or when or how she'll want to share it. And so I try to stay kind of general about what happened and how old she is, that kind of thing, just so that she can.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, but all my daughters are under, they were 9 and under at this time, so she's young. And the individual who abused her is a couple of decades older. So, so she's having these meltdowns, and it's really textbook. If you look it up, she had a lot of really self-loathing language, and she was making these really extreme attempts to push me away, like with her words and even physically. And she started having just some outbursts even of violence and really like intensely disproportionate anger towards herself or her siblings or me or her dad. But the main thing that I noticed that just changed in her, it just overnight, now that it was on the surface, was fear. Fear really consumed her, especially in certain places that were similar to where she had been abused, and especially at nighttime. And really, even to this day, she still wakes up crying and disoriented and like shaking and sweating just about every night. And because we're kind of in that just really raw dealing with the grief and just trying to get our bearings about what had happened and how we should respond, it's kind of sad to say I didn't think about it, about praying super intentionally about her nightmares, even though she was having them every single night. There were so many other things we were dealing with. But just in skipping ahead for a moment, we've been praying very intentionally over her and with her before she sleeps. And there have been several mornings recently where she's come to me just with this huge glowing grin, and she's like, "Mom, no nightmares." And so we're really ecstatic about every single night that she gets peace, because it's not always often, but we're being more prayerful about that. But so, going back to, here we are, the grief and meltdowns. It's something that I didn't anticipate was how this would kind of domino affect my 3 other girls. You know, when anybody has a bad day, even a grumpy day in the family, it can affect everyone. And so with these really intense meltdowns, and the other kids are too young, they couldn't understand, even if I had explained to them, which I didn't try to do because I didn't feel like it was age appropriate, what is happening with their sibling. And so they all just start melting down. I mean, I have 2 or 3 kids at the same time, just like piggyback crying or being really needy or whatever. And it was just extremely overwhelming. And,
well, I'm sure you're the one who's wanting to melt down.
Oh, yeah.
In all this, and then you've got to care for other people. That's hard.
Yes, very much so. And each new word that would come out that my daughter never knew before, or something she would say about herself, that were just these constant blows to my heart. And I had very little time to process because of mothering 4 kids and all the other things that I was doing. And this is another way that God was gracious to me. Now, in these first couple of months, I could not go to church because my heart was just hemorrhaging, and it was too raw of a thing to confide in people. Not that they weren't worthy of it. I have an awesome group of women at the church who they're just incredible. They're incredibly safe. But this wasn't even information that, again, because it's my daughter's story as well, I wasn't sure who do I want to tell, what do I want to say. I don't have any words for it. I just don't know. So what I would do is on Sundays, my husband worked full time, so he would have 8 hours away from home 5 days a week. But I was home 24/7, so it did get very overwhelming. And so on Sundays, he would take the children to church, and I would stay, and that was my alone processing time with God. And I would really just pour out my heart to him, and he was extremely faithful. Every time he met with me, he spoke with me about whatever I was crying out to him about. A lot of it wasn't even necessarily words or something that made sense. It was just kind of all feelings at this point. But
so what were those feelings? What do you feel about God after you find that this has happened to a child?
Well, a lot of it for me was just, I would say, a pure pain. I did not struggle with anger towards God. At this point, I have a very kind of rough past, and so I have a lot of history with God. And so by this time, I know that if he is going to allow something that is traumatic or something that is hard, that I know tears up his heart, I know he loves her more than I do. I have no doubt about his love. And so because of that, I mean, I have some sexual abuse in my past as well, multiple different experiences when I was young. I was date raped as a teenager, different things. God has redeemed everything. I've seen him do it countless times. I love the testimonies that are, a lot of people know of Beth Moore or Christine Kane and their testimonies of abuse and how God has redeemed and used that. And so I didn't have that in between me and God. I had no anger. I had no questions or judgment towards him about why he would allow it, because I just don't think it's something that I can understand this close to it. But I trust him that over time, but it's going to be shown that he's going to redeem everything. So really it was just kind of this pure pain and grief and trying to go, how do you want me to respond? What do you want me to do? I want to take everything good possibly that can come out of this. I want you to, I'm listening, give me everything you got, because I want this situation to be as fully glorifying to you as possible. So
that is, just being able to say that shows that takes a level of faith to be able to start out the process to say this happened and show me all the good. That's a huge leap. So
that is how I was going into it. That was definitely, and my husband has a really, very much the same. We were totally on par with that because we have really rough pasts. We've had all kinds of addictions, all kinds of things that God has totally redeemed us from and brought us through. So we have a lot of faith about what he can do in someone because we're totally different people than we were 15 years ago. So it was helpful that my husband was in the same place spiritually. But just in the pain, for me, it really felt like a loss. Like I lost my daughter. She was still alive, but I felt like she would speak and I'm like, you're a different person. It was just, so to me, I felt like I was grieving her, like I had just lost her. Mm. And because of that pain, I was trying to homeschool. And like I said, at this time, they were 4 and 2 and about 6 months old, the youngest, but my oldest was 9. And I just still felt that responsibility of she needs an education this year just because this intense situation has happened. And I was just praying, God, I don't know. I cannot even think straight. I don't know how to do this.
Yeah, nobody cares about multiplication facts.
I just can't. Craziness. So I was just praying a lot about that, and it came to mind. There's this classical education model school in Houston that I absolutely love. 2 of my sisters have worked there for a couple of years, and it's a scenario where they're on campus 2 days, at home 2 days, but the planning would all be done for me. So I would just have to go through the motions, and I knew that would provide some stability and structure that we had to stick with, and that would be good for my daughter socially and with the healthy relationships there. And I knew that'd be great for her spiritually. So I really love their whole stance on everything that has to do with God at that school. So I was like, God, okay, you know what time it is. We're already into the school year. This school maxes out their classes, in the summer. There's no way. But I contacted the headmaster of the school anyway, and I just said, I'm just curious. Might there be an opening for my daughter in this class? And it just so happened, as God does things, that there was one girl, and there were 3 classes in her age group, and one girl and her family were moving. And this is right at the end of the first quarter, so that my daughter, could come in right at the beginning of the second quarter. And this is like exactly when I contacted them. So there was like no wait. We just prepared, and she got to go. And that was just a huge work of God, that space opened up, that my sisters worked there, so I didn't even have to drive into Houston. My oldest daughter rode with one of them. It was just a huge way that God blessed and helped me bear and sort and work through what was going on with my other daughters. And so we're regaining a little bit of footing as far as we've got some schedule, some structure. Things are, I'm saying it's better. It's like, now we're down to like 2 to 3 hours of meltdowns a day. But it was still, there was a noticeable that it was a little bit better. And then we got a call from my mother-in-law. As I mentioned right at the beginning, my husband is an only child, and his father has had Alzheimer's and dementia for about 10 years. And we've known that at some point, because he's an only child and because we wanted to keep him at home, that we would be in a full-time caretaking situation. And what happened is this was right at the turn of the year, he took a very severe downturn. He could no longer care for himself at all. He was incontinent. He was trying to walk away down the freeway several times a day, and my mother-in-law, who worked from home, could not continue to do her job and keep him safe. And so now we're at this place of now we're going to be moving into a co-living and a full-time caretaking situation. And so for me, on top of everything else that was going on emotionally, I felt like I was losing my home base. I don't know if that makes sense, but those are the words that I just kept having. And I was going, oh, Lord, okay. We knew this was coming, but it still felt sudden.
The timing is a little bit hard.
Yes, it is. And,
to say the least.
Yes, and I so wanted to make sure and be as respectful as I could be of my mother-in-law's home. I didn't want her to feel like she had lost her home base as well. I knew she has rhythms and preferences, and there is no gentle way to bring a family of 6 with 4 children, like under 9, into a home. It's like a hurricane. There's no...
Yep. I think that's what my parents always say. The tornado was here.
Right. It's just, there's no way for that to be gentle. I knew it would be a major life adjustment for everyone. And so then I've got this grief going on. And then as a wife and a mom, I'm feeling the adjustments for each individual child. And especially nighttime is hard, learning to sleep someplace new and that kind of thing. And I'm feeling it for my husband and for my mother-in-law and for myself. Trying to learn all these new logistics, and then like the smaller things like keeping the baby that wants to climb the stairs off 300 times a day, And so I felt like God was leading me into this just really intense boot camp kind of way, how I could have all of my hope and joy in Him, regardless of my circumstances, and that it had to be this, because it had to be in Him, because every single day was this string of, it was just chaos, like high intensity.
Like I can't even think about wanting hope and joy. Like I would just want to survive that,
Right. But that's what I needed for survival. That's what I was praying for. I'm like, I am not going to survive if you don't give me hope and joy, because there's so much darkness that comes with grief. I couldn't see very far in front of my face. And so I logically know seasons change and, God's working things out and other things are going to come. But my reality was chaos and intensity and grief. And it's just overwhelming. And so I'm like, give me hope and joy, right now, today. And I was thinking what's an example that I could give of some of the things that happened? But I am not the neatest, cleanest housekeeper, and one of the things with my father-in-law's dementia is that if he sees anything out on any surface, counters, floors, anything, he is going to pick it up. And if it's edible, he's going to eat it. And if it is, anything else, like our shoes, toys, and things, he will, throw it in the wooded lot next door, or, in the dumpster across the street, or, in the trash can. So, I found, my wedding shoes, in the trash can, and just...
Oh, my gosh.
So, and he would, go in the girls' room and take out all of their drawers looking for his walking shoes, which we had hidden from him so he wouldn't walk away, and then this is just on top of normal life. You're trying to do school, you're trying to do meals, and... So when I say chaos, I mean my daughter and the neighbor coming into the garage and physically wrestling a bottle of diesel injector fuel out of his hands so he won't drink it because he thinks it's a drink. And so chaos.
Oh, wow.
Chaos.
Yeah.
So I was really feeling the stress at this point. I was feeling very over my head because of the waves of dealing with the sexual abuse and then with the responsibilities of the kids and the education, the meals, and all those things. And so I was intentionally seeking God every day. I knew that I needed to, that I wasn't going to survive without it. And what I felt the Holy Spirit kept saying to me was from 1 Peter chapter 5. It's the verses 6 and 7. But what he was just saying to me in my spirit was, cast all your cares upon me. And he said that our conversation for 2 or 3 days probably went his spirit prompting me saying, I want you to cast all your cares upon me. And me saying, okay, I want to. I am all for that. I want you to have them all. How do I do that? I don't know how, because I just wasn't having processing time, like I was saying. So things are building up, all these stresses. And I'm going, how do I cast all my cares upon you? And so after a couple of days of going back and forth with him about that, he was really impressing on me and prompting me that he wanted me to look at the context for that verse, specifically that he wanted me to look at the verse before, cast all your cares upon him, for he cares for you. And so I did. I looked it up, and it says this. It says, humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that he may lift you up in due time. And so I was like, okay. You want me to humble myself before you under your mighty hand? And I was like, what is humbling? And part of that is remembering how mighty he is. And so I would literally physically every day get on my face, flat on the floor before him. And I would intentionally practice remembering how great he is, the things that I know about him, what I know about who he is. I would sometimes read through some of my old journals. And I even picked up the devotional companion book to the book that I'd first read about 10 years ago when I fell in love with him. That book was Jesus, the One and Only. And the devotional companion is 90 Days with Jesus, the One and Only. So I was like, I know that this is going to bring back, I just really want to remember who you are and how mighty you are. And so as I would remember him and think about him, that is when the grip of the anxiety that was just around my throat and on my shoulders, that's when it would start to melt away, and my circumstances and the struggles would be in proper perspective again to his greatness. It was when I would remember what he's done for me, his incredible power and love, that was when I was able to cast my cares on him, but only after that, after I'd humbled myself before him. And then he would lift me up, and this was every morning we went through this. I've got to remember again. And then he would lift me up and help me through the day. And I remember when I was thinking, because there are so many scriptures that God reminded me of and spoke to me through during these months. But I would say that these verses that I've mentioned would be just key. Because I think I had heard so many times that verse, cast your cares upon him, for he cares for you. But I don't remember knowing the kind of prerequisite with it. Humble yourselves before him under his mighty hand, and in due time he will lift you up. And so I just wanted to make sure and say that I really appreciate what you do through this podcast, Amy, because what you're doing is encouraging people to share about his might and about his faithfulness in hard places. And this is how we learn to cast our cares on him and have the faith to keep going because of his faithfulness. And so I wanted to tell you thank you for sharing the faith stories that you do through this podcast. And
Well, thank you for saying that. I know, it really absolutely helps me remember who God is and how He works. And I think I was just talking to somebody recently and saying how it's still, even though, I'm listening and hearing these stories, sometimes something new comes up and it's still hard, but it does help to remember, like, no, wait, let me remember, He was faithful. And, even when you start to doubt, you can bring back those memories of Him being faithful, and, does make it easier to say yes.
Yes, it does. I think the harder the story, the more you need to know the details and how He's been faithful, because a lot of times we get kind of a news story clip of something really tragic or really hard that's happened. But the amazing things about books or something more in depth is you see how God really walked with the person through that hard circumstance instead of just kind of catching the news headline. And so, yeah, and you mentioned this before too. One other thing about that verse that I wanted to make sure and say was, during these long days of me being a caretaker to a man with Alzheimer's and 4 children with a wide range of needs, and trying to support my husband who just was going through his own heartbreaks with our daughter and with his dad, and saying with his dad, this is just like a long goodbye with his dad. And I would like kind of cry out at the end of the night. I'd be like, I need someone to take care of me. I want my mom. I want to be cared for. I want a caretaker. And through this same verse, it was God telling me very clearly, I care for you. I am your caretaker. And and I just was like, I will soak that up every day.
Well, that's what, the whole feathers, the verse that He gave me through our adoption is, He will cover you with His feathers, and under His wings you will find refuge. Yeah. And, that whole verse is, the fact that you need refuge means that there's bad things happening and hard things happening. And so He doesn't promise that it's not going to be hard, but He promises that He cares for us by His presence. And it sounds like that's exactly what you found through this time.
Yeah, that's the best kind of care. That's what you really need when you're grieving, His presence.
Well, guys, we're going to stop the interview right there. I know it's right in the middle of an intense conversation, but I know she has already challenged us. I mean, just the fact that God prepared her ahead of time for the desert. I love that. I love that they have that relationship, that she would be quiet enough to be able to hear God say that to her and to be able to prepare her heart. The fact that she did not respond in anger at God, that it was, show me all the good things. Like, how much could we learn from God if, when something terrible like this happened to us, we immediately say, God, show me what good things you have for me in this. I mean, I'm so challenged by that. It is definitely not my first, reaction to something. Definitely probably some anger and questioning and all of that. And yet she immediately went to, God, show me the good things out of this bad situation. And then again, teaching us how to cast our cares on Him. She absolutely was laid down with burdens and stress, and how God used that to teach her how to cast her cares upon the Lord. So all of that she's already learned, and it's almost not even started. There's so many more lessons that you're going to hear next week about how she wanted to quit, and how at some point she did get to the point of rage, and learning about judgment and forgiveness, and all of these good things are still coming. So I hope you come back next week. If you want to check out a couple of the resources already and see the show notes, you can go over to featherspodcast.com, and definitely come back next week, and we will see you then.